Is there anything you'd like me to focus on ahead of that?
Yeah, I mean, here's one thing that I'm going to talk about tomorrow that it would be really interesting to see what you might have to say.
Okay. All right, then I will go back to Book of the Dead. And maybe I had some thoughts, but then I got a little bit scattered in my mind. Yes, Jambudvipa, I think I read that. Block the womb door and remember renunciation. Now is the time when that is essential. Yes. All right. Is everybody there now?
Yeah, Professor Thurman.
Oh, there's everybody. Hello, everybody. How are you? Glad to see you're all still alive. That's really good. Wonderful. And Andrew has been helping you a lot with what's going on. And I'm in a different place. I'm at Menla in the Nalanda Conference Center in a side room where we're doing a retreat. And but I'm breaking from that to be with you. And I think we were on page 191, I believe. And you harden the Lord's presence of my tree. No, I think I read that one too. And okay, I think this is where we begin 193, I think, with this thing. But one of you had a question I did see on an email about death. It's a little off this immediate thing, but it's a good question. And she reported a story of seeing as like a wave leave her father's face when he passed away. And no one else in her family saw it. And the nurse who came to deal with the body afterwards hadn't seen it, but she saw it. And then she asked the Dalai Lama about it. And the Dalai Lama, I don't know when that was, but it was a while ago. And His Holiness said, "Don't worry, no soul, just energy," he said. But actually, since that time, the Dalai Lama has expressed that he thinks it's perfectly acceptable to use the term soul to refer to the subtle, the super subtle body, the super subtle mind body that is aware of clear light, which is the one that goes on after death. And, you know, the reason that, you know, the Western translators, when Buddhism first became known, they translated Atma, the word Atma in Sanskrit, or in Atma in Pali, as a soul. And then, so then they said Anatma, oh, great, Buddhism has no soul. So because they were happy, because most of those translators in the 19th century were getting away from various forms of Christianity or Judaism, but especially Christianity. And they didn't want, they were happy with the modern secularism, and they didn't want to be afraid of hell again. So they didn't like to be reborn. So they went around translating Atma as soul instead of self, which is more proper. And anyway, in Sanskrit, the word for soul is jiva, you know, which also means life force or something. But jiva can kind of be soul. So the point is that the doctrine of the immortal soul in some other religions that mean that there's some kind of essence of yourself that doesn't ever change, is a fixed, absolute, permanent thing. And that's what God will put in a hell body, I guess, send to hell or take up into heaven, into an angel body. But it always stays you, it's always the same, immortal soul. And Buddha would not agree with that there's anything unchanging in the universe even, except the lack of the universe, which means nirvana, which means bliss. And so therefore, the Buddhists in India had to defend their scientific evolutionary biological teaching about the rebirth and about the fact that we are beings, according to Buddha's empirical discovery, that we are beings who live just all the way from Precambrian slime, to use the Western materialist mythology of the species, the evolution of species by material complication, crawling up out of the primordial soup on the planet, as if it's just a material process of making more and more complications, ending up with the brain, and then the brain makes the person who has a brain think that they're a person, which is the Western mythology, actually. And Buddhism has something equally huge, even bigger than that, in that we have been alive beginninglessly in the relative illusory sense, but that's still a real sense. It's a little bit illusory reality, but it's still a real sense. And that is the Buddhist view. We are alive from the beginningless. Every single one of us has been every single life form, because you have a beginningless, that is to say, eternal backwards, beginningless life stream. And therefore you can't say you haven't been a dinosaur, you haven't been this or that. Every male in the mammal forms, every male has been a female, every female has been a male. Every human has been an animal, every animal has been a human. The one thing we haven't been yet, as far as we know, is a Buddha, which in a way is something like, rather than a regular life form, is an infinite life form, and therefore something like a summit of evolution, the highest possible form of life, meaning a form of life that is 100% altruistic, because 100% satisfied, is completely connected to the deepest nature of reality, which is the uncreated, infinite clear light of the void, the infinite energy of the clear light of the void, without atoms, beyond dark energy, dark matter, and beyond bright matter and atoms or photons or any such thing. Completely connected with that, which Buddha says we are also all completely connected with. And the difference between a Buddha and a regular human animal being of any kind is that we don't know we're connected to that, and a Buddha does know they're connected to that. That's the real difference. And once you know you're connected to that, you have a very different sense of life, in that you feel you're infinitely alive, actually. And you feel that everything is infinitely alive. And therefore you can be alive simultaneously in as many different bodies as we see on the gallery right now. Like there's a whole bunch of different people here, but if I was a Buddha, I would think I was all of you at the same time. I would think that. And then if you have a special friend or a teacher or someone who makes you think of joy and of the beauty of life, and you feel peaceful about, and you feel beloved by, whatever it might be a pet, it might be a human relationship, it might be some historical figure in your memory. But if you have anybody like that, then I would feel I was that person also if I was a Buddha. Because a Buddha is a being that identifies with everybody in their suffering, but doesn't tolerate, and therefore, like they don't want their suffering, a Buddha doesn't want their suffering, so that means compassion. And then but Buddha is better off than we are when we suffer, because the Buddha knows why we suffer. So they feel they are us. A Buddha feels they are he or she, or it. There can be an inanimate Buddha, actually. It could be the building, could be a Buddha, actually, in fact, because what's called the nirmana.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, it looks like we're just having a bit of internet connectivity issues, so bear with us, and we will have Professor Thurman back here in just a second.
Will manifest whatever that unenlightened being needs to be a doorway for them toward freedom toward, which means voidness, emptiness, selflessness, toward compassion, toward love, toward joy, etc., toward bliss. Whatever is a doorway for that person for that, a Buddha will manifest that automatically. And the energy with which they will manifest it is the energy of the being's own wish to be free of the suffering. And the reason the Buddha has that energy to do it is that the Buddha detects in every being, even though that being is suffering, they detect that the underlying energy of that being is freedom from suffering and bliss, actually. That there's something like, if you will, the soul of the being is connected to the clear light of the void and is aware of it, and therefore is a bliss, is a kind of bliss energy. But what has happened to that being, why they're suffering, is they have a distorted sense of what they are. So they shut down the sort of welling up of a sense of well-being from within themselves, as well as they're afraid of any kind of strong energy outside themselves, because they think maybe it's going to destroy them or something, because they're very fragilely poised between a deep unconscious awareness of their oneness with the gracious, blissful, wonderful energy of the universe, infinite, inexhaustible and pleasant energy of the universe, and also between all kind of energies they see coming at them of things they think that are other than them, because our ignorance about our own self-centeredness makes us vulnerable to the one of these two forces, the inner one or the outer one. And when the inner one does come out, though, for us, and this is important for us to understand about taking rebirth, because we're in this place of the becoming between, or the becoming Bardo, or the existence between, where we're quite frightened. We're having a lot of frightened experiences. And even if we were living in some very sort of Victorian locked up society, since we will be having visions of couples, if we're heading for the human or a mammal rebirth, we'll be having visions of couple in flagrante, delicto, or whatever you might call it, in flagrante delicto. And we might think that's awful and horrible. Ooh, like, oh, they're getting it on. What is that? And we might veer away from a nice couple, of a lovely couple, because we're so scared of whatever the huffing and puffing they're going through, whatever it is. And so
sorry, everyone. It looks like we're just in a funny spot of internet connectivity here. He should be back with us momentarily.
To relate to, because the energy of the suffering and the bearing the suffering and the feeling of the suffering as unbearable by the person creates an energy. And then the Buddha can also see the soul of the being. We can use that word fearlessly, actually. The soul of the being as itself connected, and not only the soul, but I mean every fiber, every atom in the being's hand or arm or whatever it is held together by this strong force of the universe, which is the clear light of the void. So they see that the being actually is perfectly all right. And the reason they're suffering is because they don't know that they're perfectly all right, and they are completely struggling and suffering with it. And so this is very, very important. But when you fall asleep, you every night, and I hope you do sleep soundly during the night, you surrender to the other reality that you normally try to control and fend off. You surrender to it because anything could happen to you when you're unconscious. And of course, you arrange it in your room, and you lock the door, and it's the right temperature, and you have a cozy pillow and a blankie and the whole thing. And so you arrange that you will be protected so you feel safe to surrender. But nevertheless, somebody could break down the door, there could be a hurricane, whatever. You don't know what's going to happen, but you surrender to it. And once you're unconscious, then the deeper energy that constitutes your being, the clear light of the void, the energy of emptiness, if you will, which is very deceptive, because we're taught to think of emptiness as just empty space. That's because that's a simile. That's just a metaphor, simile. But actually, it is not empty space. It's also filled space. Emptiness is, matter is emptiness. Emptiness is matter. So emptiness is actually everything. But when you approach it as that each thing is completely relative to each other thing, and things do not have what we think they have, a kind of intrinsic essence or reality or objectivity or identity that corresponds to our concept for the thing, including ourselves, that we have intrinsic identity that corresponds to what we call ourselves. I'm a person, I'm a male, I'm a human, I'm an American, I'm a pinky. And I never say whitey, by the way, they're all pinky. All the so-called white people are all pink. All of them pink in search of a tan. That's what they are. There's no one is white. That's a wrong misnomer, and it makes them too proud, and it makes other people too irritated with them. I'm sorry. That's my personal joke. And so I apologize. So point is that then that clear light energy, which is the real deep well-being of ourselves as embodied beings, can well up into us and restore our energy so we wake up in the morning feeling better. If we were lying in the dark nothingness like materialist thing, why would we feel a tiniest bit better when we wake up? No way. We'd be just as bad as when we fell asleep. So we do that every night. And then every time we die, what death is defined as is where all the intermediate levels of our illusory identities, of all of our different consciousnesses, dissolve, and they dissolve us into this deepest level, and we hit the infinite clear light energy of the void, and that frightens us. And so we think that we'll be lost there, or we think it is empty space, or whatever it is, because it's deceptive. Because imagine if you were a field of infinite energy, why you wouldn't do anything. Why would you? It's infinite, the energy, and it has nothing to do, therefore. Infinite energy is not going to blow up the world. It's not going to be an A-bomb. It's not some person who creates out of hatred for an enemy a mechanism that dissolves the structures of matter, like the atomic structure, and in a way taps into the infinite energy that is what holds it together normally, and somehow disrupts that. Then that infinite energy emerges as nuclear fission and completely pulverizes all sorts of matter in between. And so that's another little key secret about the fact that there being an underlying infinite energy. You say, everyone sort of without a second thought says, oh yeah, if I was at Hiroshima, yeah, I'd have my kimono and my green tea. I was having tea ceremony there with somebody, and everything is suddenly completely light and heat and destroyed, because all the atoms that constitute all those things, what holds them together, there's a chain reaction, and a deeper energy is released that wrecks all the nuclei and the electrons and the whole thing. Although we might fantasize, well, they just send electrons out, but I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it just kills everybody. And what everybody happens when they die, when they lose their structure, is they go into the bed of infinite energy. And guess what? Just like when you fall asleep, infinite energy doesn't destroy you. It renews you. So when you die, you're not destroyed. You're renewed. You have a new chance to be a new person. And the more conscious you are of the deeper impulses and deeper reactions, and also the interpretations with your conceptualization, since you're lucky to be a human with conceptualization, and your interpretations, and if you're in control of those, and if you understand what they are, then you can really do better. Death becomes a doorway to a better life, to a better embodiment. You can be more beautiful, more intelligent, more rich if you're smart enough to know that mom and dad have a decent bank account. If you check that out, you went electronically, you read their hard disk and you went into their electronics, because you're a subtle being, you can go everywhere. And so a good neighborhood, reasonable wealth, a good countryside, they're beautiful themselves. They're loving because they're having a nice time with each other, and they're not beating each other up in some way. And then you'll be reborn well. But the key to this, at the moment of where we are now, to come back to where Andrew has us focusing, says he's the guru here. The key to this is not to be afraid. When they say you cannot be killed in the between, even you see a mountain falling on you, even you see a big Tyrannosaurus risen up from that movie, a Tyrannosaurus Rex is about to crunch you up. Even you see that, then that's just a vision, and you are made of a subtler energy that they cannot devour. Or even actually in the Bardo, if you stay 49 days, they say, some traditions of the Bardo say, the between say, that you sort of die and are reborn in a new body, Bardo body. So you go through a sort of dissolving and re-emerging process every 7 days within the 49 days. Or if you're particularly stuck in the between, that you don't want to go into a completely different body because you have a big vengeance thing going on, or you're terribly attached to a beloved, and so you kind of want to stay where you can flit around them. You don't want to go into a completely new environment where you might forget, or at least subliminally you might forget the circumstances of your previous life. And so then they become ghosts, and they keep staying in the Bardo, but in the between, as a ghost, they keep dying and being reborn. Just like in a way, in life we die and we're reborn all the time. Falling asleep is a kind of dying. You die and then you don't know. You might have a nightmare. You might wake up being demented. You have no idea what's going to happen to you when you wake up, actually, when you fall asleep. So it's kind of like a dying, which is very good because it's a rehearsal for the between. And as Andrew is the master of telling you with the wonderful book he wrote called Catching the Light, or something the light. I'm in a different place, so I don't have a copy with me. But you practice dream yoga. That is to say, you cultivate the ability to wake up in the dream without waking up from the dream. And then you're conscious in the dream. And then you can practice being in a place where your emotions and your preconceptions shape your environment, which they do anyway when we're in a so-called core subjective environment. But there seems to be more stability because of our interacting with other beings. And but there's no, a concrete wall is mostly empty space. X-ray can go right through it. It's made of atoms, which are said to be a little nucleus with a electron zapping around, mostly empty. And so what we think of as a really solid thing is pretty much a construction by us and the combined imaginations of us and billions of other beings at the same time. So, our culture does shape our material environment, actually, according to the Buddhists, which is a radical claim for materialists, I know, but that is their claim. I'm sorry, I'm being hoarse right away because I don't have a proper mic. So when I hear and I'm hard of hearing. Oh, and I don't have my hearing. Oh, I didn't turn my hearing. I was trying to experiment with a different hearing. So I didn't put on, now I won't talk so loud. So then I can't hear myself. And then I think, what do I do with my other hearing? Well, at least I have one. And my voice is too loud. And it makes me hoarse, you see. And I can't hear my voice because I think you're not hearing it. Maybe I put it in my pocket. I have to find the other hearing aid. Sorry. Where is it? No. As some of you who are a little senior like me, we have the life of this. We have the life of the spare parts. Where's my other here? I don't know. I can't find it. Never mind. I got one. One is enough. No, I won't talk so loud. So I won't go hoarse. Sorry. So sorry. You can hear me okay, right? Everybody, when I talk like that, you can hear me? Good. So this is really important. So even therefore, what I'm coming around to is even therefore in the between, if you had a frightening vision of being assaulted by a monster or something, or a tree falling on you, or drowning or something, anything that you did. The point is, it's not only don't be afraid because you're in the between, but don't be afraid because you are an infinite continuum of life. So death is just a stepstone, a stepping stone, a quantum leap in the intervening of life, like sleeping and waking up. I remember I was a little shocked even after years and years. Only about 2-3 years ago, I saw His Holiness on a video in Poland, in an airport, in probably a VIP lounge. He'd probably been there for some event. And I, as usual, when I see that, I'm always mad I'm not there myself. Never mind. And he was there, and then they brought in a bunch of Polish girls, adorable little girls with those kind of white like blouses with the needlework on it, with red flowers, the whole, and like I think they said maybe flower hair garland in their hair, like ethnic costume of a Polish village children in a festival sort of situation. And they brought in to greet him, and I don't know, maybe sang a song or something, or saluted him, or thanked him for visiting Poland. I don't know exactly that, because what I saw was he was chatting with them, and then somehow the topic of dying came up, or being reincarnated or something, which part I can't remember well, but what I remember is he's looking at his small, young children. No, some of them at 12, 13, 9, 8, like that. And he's saying, oh, it's okay. That's no problem. It's really easy. He says, it's just like, it's just like when you go and buy a new dress. He says, you're tired of your old dress, and you kind of go someplace, and then you get a new one, and then you put on the new dress. He says, that's all there is to it. I thought, oh, that's nice. He said, heaven knows what they've been hearing in their family when grandpa died or whatever, like, oh, have to go to church, and people weeping and tearing their hair and God knows what. And here he's saying, why? But that's the key, you see. We have to turn around. We've been so frightened, and also people in India and China and Japan also, it isn't like they're Eastern people or not, and in Tibet. The authorities of human societies over the last few thousand years at least, they feel their power is secured by terrorizing their populations and frightening them that life is, nature is red in tooth and claw. What is that? That's a Longfellow or something, our American poet. And there's hell waiting for you, if you did something, if you had a little fun, actually. Frightened of everything, and therefore even on top, and even in some of the theistic forms, people they think it's good to be afraid of God, fear of God. Oh, he's a good man. He's a fear of God in him. Why should you be afraid of God? If you're a happy, nice person, why would God be mad about that? So, but that's just, God is just a word for some sort of ultimate reality. So the Buddha's gift to us all, it was not a religion of Buddhism particularly, that evolved and that has been useful to many. And also it has been abused by some, occasionally here and there, and this and that place. But as it's been used as a sort of, warrant for authority and therefore domination. But mostly it's not. It's because it really focuses on liberation and freedom. But it is all based on his discovery that life is good. And you have the capability of knowing that, experiencing that. And he can't really, you won't do it just by listening to what he says, life is good. But just by saying, I believe that, and then just repeat that all the time. But you can learn to critique those aspects all the way down into your subconscious instincts that make you afraid of life. And therefore, being afraid of death is being afraid of life. Because everyone knows that death is somewhere where you go unconscious. And then you're taught that if you're unconscious, you can't defend yourself and you don't know what's going to happen to you. And so therefore, then the materialists, they come up luckily with a really fail-safe solution to sell to you that nothing is going to happen to you. So then, oh, great, at least it's just nothing. You get a real relief out of that. But since we remain rightfully afraid of pain, and we don't want it, and we don't have to have it, actually, if we understand life. But anyway, we're worried when we don't know what we are doing, when we become unconscious, that it will result in something painful happening. Being reborn in a painful situation, being in a painful bardo situation, afterlife situation, and so on. So this is key. And the key to it is to find what the dear psychologist Erik Erikson, that I studied with years ago briefly, but I never went to class properly, but I read the book. And then I got an A on the exam because I liked him. But I didn't properly go to class because I was a no good student. And I was always thinking I was going to escape to nirvana or something. I don't know what. But basic trust in the universe, which he considers the first step of a child, and that which a human being can get from the good mother, or Winnicott from the good enough mother, because you're helpless. We've all been helpless for years as children, and we think we're not when we reach adolescence, but we are. And some WASP. I once was at one WASP beach club, and there I was informed by my host, middle-aged lady, that not to worry, we're allowed to sign our parents' name until we're 55. I'm sorry, but talk about being dependent on the kindness of strangers. Okay, so that's the main thing I want to say. Okay, then let's look at this. So don't be afraid, because that's what it's saying. We did, I think, about maybe we'll do, because it's a good omen, the Buddha land. So we'll go back on 191 and we'll say, if you are the most intelligent type of person. Oh yeah, well no. Hey, noble one. And I'm thinking of changing in the future my noble ones and my noble truths. I'm changing it to friendly one and friendly fact. Because Buddha used the term noble to mean someone, to describe a cognitive condition of someone who is genuinely empathetic to not as much as the Buddha, of course, necessarily right off, but generally empathetic to the degree that when they are in presence of another person, they cognitively experience the other person's presence as being as important as their own, not just a side event of their own. In other words, they kind of identify with the heartbeat of the other at the same time as they want to take care of their own heart. Do you know what I mean? And that's called a noble person by Buddha. He took the term that was a class term in his era of an upper class person, and he used it to mean you become upper class when you're aware and you are genuinely, emotionally, and cognitively aware of the perspective of the other. That is to say, you kind of live in the other person's shoes. Doesn't mean you don't live in your own shoes, but you also in others' shoes, sort of automatically. You kind of have an automatic cognitive focus like that, which I think is the definition of a friend. So nowadays I'm thinking of changing a little bit, and at least popular expression of calling it the 4 friendly facts. And the hey, friendly one is a way of talking to the person in the bardo. So we say, hey, friendly one. Thus, if it becomes necessary by the power of evolution to enter the womb, you should now rely on the instruction for choosing the womb. Listen, Do not go to just any womb door that presents itself. If, due to the demonic butchers, you lose the power not to go, then meditate on Hayagriva. That's a fierce Hayagriva, fierce compassion. Since now you have subtle clairvoyance, you will be able to understand the nature of all places. So choose your place of rebirth wisely. There are two instructions, one for transmitting your soul into the, good for you, I was using it before that, into the pure Buddha lands, and one for choosing a womb door in the impure life cycle. You should now practice the following. If you are the most intelligent type of person, which I'm sure all of you are, if there's any of you who have been conditioned by your social circumstances and your siblings or your anybody that you're not of the most intelligent type, please take my word for it. You are, or you wouldn't be in Andrew's course. Okay, you wouldn't be thinking about death as part of life. That means you are the most intelligent type. And you think you should formulate to perform the soul transmission to the angel realms, you should formulate the following controlling intention. Alas, I am sad that I have stayed here in this swamp of the life cycle for so long, beginninglessly for boundless, countless aeons. Alas, during all the lifetimes of so many Buddhas, I have still not been liberated. I am revolted and nauseated by this interminable life cycle. I am terrified of it. I totally repudiated it. I must now remember the methods of escaping it. I must now take miraculous rebirth in the blossom of a lotus, in the presence of the Buddha Amitabha, which means immeasurable light, infinite light, in the Western Pure Land universe, Sukhavati the blissful. It is essential here, end quote. It is essential here to make great effort to aim all your willpower in this way toward the Western pure universe of Sukhavati. And by the way, you can always do that yourself in case you never read the Pure Land Sutra, which I recommend that you do. I also, if you ever want to be a dying doula, hospice worker or something, you read such books. Doesn't mean you're going to ask anybody to be a Buddhist or that you need to be a Buddhist, but what they are in the most vivid descriptions of heavens that you can find, except in a few Western mystics and Sufi mystics and things you might find, and Hindu Taoist mystics, but they're really more vivid than what we have in the Western literature. Like you never see what it's like there, you know, like what the landscape is like, what the buildings are like, what the people are like, their bodies, the colors, you know, Dante a little bit, but you know, not much, you know. And the scripture doesn't have much of it, you know, because it's too much fantasy, you know, for authoritarian society to allow people that much imagination. So therefore, it's good to read that, to be able to have really kind of vivid expectation of beauty. It's very good. Whichever pure universe you have faith in, whether it's Amitabha Sukhavati, Abhirati, the delightful land of Akshobhya, these are different famous like celestial Buddhas. Ganavyuha, the pure land of Vairochana. Alakavati, the earthly paradise of Vaishravana. Potalaka, the earthly paradise of Avalokiteshvara. Or the lotus light copper mountain palace of Padmasambhava and Uddiyana. If you aim your concentrated willpower in any one of these pure lands, of course, if you have any ideas of any Western heavens that you've seen described, then use those. And hold it one pointedly without distraction. You will be reborn immediately in that pure land. Further, if you wish to be reborn in the presence of the Dharma Lord Maitreya in the Tushita heaven, just aim your will thinking, now that I am in this between, it is time to visit the Dharma Lord Maitreya. That's the next Buddha, but at the moment he's in the Tushita heaven. I will go there. You will be miraculously reborn in the heart of a lotus in the presence of Maitreya. So that's the thing. And I think, did I tell you about Shinran, the great Japanese, the Martin Luther of Japan? Did I tell you about him? I think I didn't in this class. I will. So what he was like Martin Luther, he was a monk in the Mount Yei in Kyoto, above Kyoto Monastery, of the Chentai school, which was the Lotus Sutra school. And he was meditating and, this and that, but he was very deeply looking into himself, and he saw sort of eros and thanatos in his unconscious, which Buddhist meditators do find, which you do find if you meditate deeply about and go inward to try to find your inner clear light Buddha nature, and the way you will find your unconscious instincts. And in there, like Freud said, you will find eros and thanatos. That is to say, you will find immense erotic, what Freud called, I always remember the phrase, if you ever saw X-Men Endgame, go ahead, you can see weird movies. They're very good. The special effects are helping your imagination and preparing you for the between, I tell you. I know that we feel I don't want to go see such a violent thing, but they're really amazing. Okay. So the point is that that's where, so Shinran discovered that in himself. And he became, like Martin Luther, he became despaired of his ability to purify his mind through meditation and through all the marvelous teachings and strategies that he had. And he felt he was a sinner, like a hopeless sinner. So then he remembered in the Pure Land Sutra, he read the vow of Amitabha Buddha, this Buddha of boundless light. He'd heard of this kind of heaven, Sukhavati, but he was just not living in it with his presence in his mind. And then he was reading that sutra, and he read the 49th vow of Amitabha. And in the 49th vow of Amitabha says, if when I'm a Buddha, any being, anywhere in the world or the universe, and one who knows language, could be human or God, or an anti-God, but maybe not an animal who can't understand language. But it could be some animal, like a parrot or something. So if any being thinks about me and calls my name, Amitabha, or in Japanese it's Amida, and calls out to me, if I cannot bring them with the energy of my light rays that radiate from my Buddha body when I'm a Buddha, and then just scoop them and bring them into my pure land, free of suffering, into a rebirth in the land of bliss, I won't become a Buddha. I do not want to be, I refuse to be a Buddha, unless when I'm a Buddha, my vow is that I'll be able to do that. And when he read that, he suddenly felt embraced, like Martin Luther did. He felt embraced by the infinite grace and compassion of the Buddha Amitabha, as sinful and sinner as he was. And then maybe he looked up and he had like a complete feeling of being already, without dying, in the Pure Land of Amitabha. And so then he lived the rest of his life sort of as if he were already in the Pure Land, and yet he was walking around as a human being, but in his mind, in his inner mind, he was in the presence of this infinite light. And then, everyone presumes when he died, he did go there, and which was quite a long time, because then the way he lived, he was so happy and so blissful, feeling he was surrounded and enfolded in the loving embrace of Amitabha, almost like a really devoted, faithful, monotheistic believer, as His Holiness likes to say, who feel just the same, and they're just heading toward freedom and liberation, and they have a sense of a loving God, like Krishna, Jesus, whoever it may be, and that God will just take care of them. And that's just the same as someone who goes to Pure Land. Now, in the Pure Land Sutra, they're a little careful, though, just like Jesus was in Sermon on the Mount, where after giving Sermon on the Mount, he said that some bad people who would come when he was back in heaven at the right hand of the Father, I don't know, left or right hand, I don't remember, but at the hand of the Father, that someone would come to him and say, okay, Jesus, I did a lot of really strong, powerful, wonderful things in your name. So please let me into heaven. And he said, I will, literally it says, I did great deeds of power in your name. And then he says, I will say unto them, get ye gone, evildoer, I know ye not. Ye did not turn the other cheek. You did not give your cloak when they asked for your shirt. You did not go the extra mile, etc., etc., etc. Right? He says that. So similarly, in the Lotus Sutra, they say, although Amida will bring you into Pure Land, if you have a really still an impure mind, you're born in the lotus bud you're born in the Pure Land instantly is closed. So you can't see the Buddha, and you have to sort of spend time in the closed lotus until somehow you feel genuine, separate yourself mentally in some way, realize enough of emptiness to realize that you don't have to be guilty forever about everything. And it's not a matter of just being guilty because you did something wrong, but it's a matter of doing right things and great things and wonderful things for others now. And which emptiness will enable you to see that there is that possible change, and you will not wallow and act like you're trapped in it forever in a hell of guilt. And so that's what you do, I guess, in the closed lotus. They don't give too much detail. They just say you're there for a long time. So that's in order to make sure that the wrong, the sinner doesn't sin more thinking I can just throw myself on Amitabha. They say that. Okay. So again, so now back to the book. So anyway, I hope you feel less frightened now of everything. Okay. So please keep in your mind this idea. And the way to work on it, by the way, the way you meditate on this is you don't just repeat, oh, life is good, oh, the ultimate reality, oh, clear light of the void is good, good, good. But that's okay to do. But that's not the main thing is you sort of meditate on it. Try to see how it looks if that were the case, how things would look. But then at the same time, you use your critical wisdom to listen to the arguments in your own mind of someone saying, well, what about all that suffering? Come on, how could it be?
Hi, everyone. So it looks like we're having a little bit of internet connectivity issues. So to help with the bandwidth and saving that and get the streaming a little better, if you could turn your video off would be super helpful.
What happened? What happened?
Just a second. Oh, sorry, it looked like you just froze there for a second. So it might be that we're stretching our bandwidth a little bit too thin. So I've asked people to turn their cameras off just so the streaming is a little bit better.
Oh, I see. We lost the group, you mean?
No. They turned their camera off.
Oh.
So that they can hear you better, but you can keep speaking.
Oh, I see. Okay, fine. Great. That's okay. I like seeing them, but it's okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter. So, okay. So, listen to it. Choose your continent for rebirth, as explained already. That means, which of the, in our case, 7 continents, they have 4 in their view, because they didn't go around the world in those days. Usually, or they did, but they saw it differently. Maybe North and South America as one continent, and sort of Western Europe and Africa as one continent. And then the Asian part is one, and then Oceania is one, something like that. The water continent. Again, if you do not want to proceed to the Pure Land, listen to it. Choose your continent for real sword explained. Using your clairvoyance, enter a room in a place where the Dharma has spread. So in other words, using your clairvoyance to hear what people are talking about. See if they have some sort of realistic teaching, and especially mentioning the idea of the possibility of freedom and liberation. So since that's what nirvana really means, is freedom and liberation. Caution is required, for even if you were to be reborn magically in a heap of dung, you would get the notion that the impure mass smelled delicious, and you would be reborn in it by the force of your attraction. Therefore, you should not adhere to whatever vision occurs, and you must discount any signs that trigger attachment or aversion. Then choose a good womb. And here, the willed intention is important, so you must create it as follows. Hey, for the sake of all beings, I will be reborn as a world-ruling emperor. Presumably, I'd be a good one. Or of the priestly class, sheltering all beings like a great shade tree, or as like the child of a holy person, an adept, or of a clan with an impeccable Dharma lineage, or in a family where the parents have great faith. I must succeed in this coming life by adopting a body that has great merit to enable me to accomplish the aims of all beings, in other words, to try to have a better shot at Buddhahood, at enlightenment in the next life. Aiming your will in this way, you should enter the womb. At that time, the womb you have entered should appear to you as if magically transformed into a divine palace. You should pray to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, the archetype deities, and especially to the Lord of great compassion, Avalokiteshvara, Jesus, whoever, Krishna, whoever it is. And you should visualize that they are all anointing you in consecration as you enter the womb. And thus choosing, so you enter the womb like you're receiving an initiation. I like that. And thus choosing the womb door, there was always danger of erring. Under the influence of evolution, you might see an excellent womb door as bad. You might see a bad womb door as excellent. So here the key instruction for choosing is important. Do as follows. Even if a womb door appears to be excellent, do not become attached to it. Even if it appears bad, do not become averse to it. Enter it within the experience of the universal loving equanimity, free of lust and hate, and compulsive choosing between good and bad. This is the authentic, profound key instruction. To enter it within the experience of the universal loving equanimity, and especially, which is especially easy to do if you have cultivated in your lifetime before, that is what the infinite energy of the universe is. It's a universally loving energy. Why? Because love is defined as the will to the happiness of the beloved. And that will to emerges as energetic activity to attempt to achieve the happiness of the beloved, to what we say, make the beloved happy. But we know that you can't actually make anybody else happy by force, but maybe you can use art. By artfully, you can make someone happy. So the idea that there's an infinite energy, and it's there to be drawn on by the will of the people who don't want to suffer, and they need energy to heal. And so that energy is inexhaustibly available. It's the idea. Like they have the concept of, generosity can sense, he does agree with Max Weber, Buddha, because Max Weber said that the root of capitalism is the European monk, because they didn't know about the Tibetan one and the Indian one and so on. But he knew something about them, but he thought they were just running away to nirvana. They weren't trying to live, But the European monk worked for the corporation of the monastery selflessly without consuming the wealth that they created. And that what he called inner asceticism, he called that an inward asceticism, like an inner detachment from the fruits of their labor, which created the huge wealth of the monasteries, which attracted Henry VIII and various German princes and others to disband them when they had the excuse of Protestantism. That monks can't really be pure, and it's just God's grace that does it, and nothing you can do about it, which was Luther's decision and about his own self. But actually, there were probably good monks. There were for sure many good monks who did purify their mind, and we know Hildegard had plenty of good nuns and so on, so we know that. But anyway, that was Luther's problem, and many other people's problem, I'm sure as well. Anyway, okay, so Max Weber therefore felt that unselfishness in the sense of not consuming more than you produce, not greedily grabbing more than you're actually creating, is the root of the virtue of capitalism, of generosity-based capitalism, not greed-based. That's what he said, and Buddha agrees. Even if he agreed, and especially because in Buddha's time, the alternative to merchants were armed militaries, which he was born as. They were actually the dominant, the Kshatriyas, right? And so militaries, they have to go get wealth for their society. What? By conquering other people. And then in the talk I used to give to business people about that, I said, that's bad business when you go out and kill your customer. Then they can't buy from you next year. Then you get one, maybe that's the final price you get from them, but then they can't pay you later because they're dead. So they're conquering something like Dick Cheney thought he would kill Iraq so he could just have oil wells there. That was his plan. That's why they did it. The oil industry, robbed its presidency and then invaded Iraq to steal the oil, of course. The original acronym for the invasion, did you know that? It was Operation Operation Iraqi Liberation. And then they realized, OIL. So then they went Operation Iraqi Freedom, OIF. Seriously, it's childish and that's stupid. Very destructive, incredibly destructive. I'm sure W was a bodhisattva, but you lose your bodhisattva vow if you destroy a whole city, if you destroy a whole kingdom. You lay waste to a whole. You don't just win a war, but as a king, but if you destroy an entire, you lay waste to a whole kingdom, you definitely lose. Anyway, never mind. Okay, so loving equanimity. That's it. Hey, noble one, if you cannot abandon lust and hate, and know how to choose a womb door, then no matter what visions come to you, say the name of the three jewels, go to them for refuge, pray to the Lord of great compassion, go forward with your head held high, recognize that you are in the between, abandon possessive love toward your dear ones left behind, your son, your daughter, your friends, they cannot help you now. Now go to the blue light of the human realm and the white light of the divine realm, of the God realm. Go to the beautiful jewel house and the pleasure garden. After saying this 7 times, pray to the instructions are, pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and read 7 times the prayer for refuge from all terrors, the root verse of the 6 betweens, and the prayer for deliverance from the straits of the between. Then read loudly and precisely the liberation by wearing, the natural liberation of the body. Also read the Dharma practice, natural liberation of the intuition, which I might read. I'm sorry, of the instincts. These glasses are really not as good as my old thing. Anyway, never mind. Okay, so I will read that tomorrow, and the next day we'll look at that. We'll look at it at least. That's how we have prepared. So I think this is that we reached the end really there, and but there's more instructions. But that's the end of what you read to the person. So that's why they have you reading the prayers 7 times. But we all did that, didn't we? We didn't read them 7 times. But what is the order they gave? Prayer for refuge from all terrors. Where is that? Here it is. Prayer for refuge from all terrors of the between. I'm not going to read it 7 times. Don't be afraid. But let's read it together once. Hey, when the impulse of my lifespan is worn out as dear ones cannot help beyond this world, and I must wander alone in the between. May Buddhas mild and fierce exert the force of their compassion and clear the dense fog of darkness of misknowledge. So here, I think, loving equanimity, it said. So here, and I think Andrew is very good at teaching this. He may have already been teaching this to you. But nowadays, now at this point, what we can, in order to sort of understand that last thing that was said to us, the person in the between about be loving equanimity, we can think about that. And we can think that, what is loving equanimity? When loving equanimity is expanding the boundaries of your sense of identification. The way you do that, at which you reach the extreme of that, of course, in Buddhahood, in realization, but in orientation, let's say, since we're not planning in 2 minutes to be Buddhas, but therefore in orientation, it's when you conceive the Bodhisattva spirit, the will to enlightenment, and the determination to enlightenment, let's say, and the orientation to enlightenment. And you do, and the way to do that I'm minded to share with you just very quickly, has to do again with what we talked about and what originally in this particular retreat Andrew asked me to focus on, which is the proof, the means of proof of the future life. Because we're all coming, everyone that many people that he serves as a teacher about the between and about dream yoga and things like that, as an enlightenment teacher, we're all saddled with this materialist culture where we're taught that common sense means that there's only live this one life. So this is in relation to that. So I think I talked about how there's really not a burden of proof on the continuum of life. There's just a burden of proof on anybody who thinks something can be nothing, that energy can be destroyed and become nothing. That's because that is against all laws of nature, all observed processes of nature, and therefore has been refuted by materialists in regard to energy, the law of thermodynamics, conservation of energy. So in a way we did that, and I don't want to go there, but once you open to the possibility of yourself having an infinite continuity, you then therefore become highly motivated to try to learn to consciously die, to try to learn to take a better rebirth, at least for yourself initially, so you can keep developing, evolving toward Buddhahood. So in that case then, automatically with going on in the future life is you've had the beginning of this past lives. And then you can sort of look at the story of Buddha and the narrative of where on the brink of full enlightenment, he remembered his infinite past lives. So they all became present to him, you could say, and because the past is all there, and in the beginning of this case, it's sort of broadening your sense of identity in infinity to remember past lives that you had as other animals, because then you felt you sort of automatically realize that at that time, and of course, if you're really way on the high level, you will even remember what you felt like as a deer, as an antelope, as a crocodile, as a lemming, as a seagull, as an albatross, or whatever, dinosaur. But certainly you can identify them with all life because you were one. Okay, so and then you follow a kind of reasoning within the imagination, and you say, well, if I have a beginningless life stream, everybody else does too, and so therefore everybody else has been everything else, and therefore among the everything else's that we've been, every other being that exists was at least once, if not innumerable times, my mother. Okay, I maybe was their mother also, but, and I forgive them for biting my nipple, but they were my mother. And so they showed to me total kindness, putting my life ahead of theirs, like an enlightened person, like a saint. They did. Mothers are saintly. Maybe in some lives they weren't the best mother, they weren't a good enough mother, they were too good a mother, or they were a helicopter mother or something, maybe. But they still did the basic thing, because I'm even thinking about it. So that means my brain developed, because that means I was cuddled. So, so thinking that way, one gets a sense of drawing near to other beings, that at least that even the vicious tiger that wants to eat you was once your mother. So luckily you're in a place safe from tigers. So you can try to see the motherliness in that, even who at present is a vicious tiger, who was a human mother in many previous lives, because they're all beginningless, you see. And so you expand your sense of interconnection with other beings. And you do this in a field, a meditative field. This is a special Tibetan thing, although I think it existed in India, but I don't know of a text that really explained it clearly as the Tibetans do. You create a field in which you meditate. You visualize that you're in a positive place and someplace you really like. And you visualize that all your most admired beings are there in subtle body form above you in the sky. And they are radiating their love and blessings toward you. And this might include your parents of this life or grandparents. It might include your teachers in this life in schools. It might include someone like Buddha or someone like Jesus or someone like Moses or someone like Krishna, a god or a human who is totally loving, at least even in literature or in life, but someone who is all the beings who are very meaningful to you and who you feel really benefited you in this life that you can remember. They're all there in the sky in sort of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Star Wars kind of bodies, which Obi-Wan Kenobi shows up in, the Jedi Masters show up after they die. And they like looking like a live body too, if they happen to be still alive, whoever they are. So you think of them as up there, and then you think of them as showering you with grace and blessings, and you feeling really au point, like on your toes, because like we do if we meet someone we very strongly admire and love, we kind of feel like keyed up, in a good way, and we're on our toes. And so that's really helpful just to concentrate even. And then you imagine that all the beings in the universe are around you. And they say all the animals are there too, but they're in human form. So, because you're not bothering about time, because they were once human too. So you just think of them as all animals, but it's a vast host of humans who you don't really recognize, most of them, right? Because how many do you really know in life? And then, you're at a rally of countless humans who are looking at you. And the reason they're looking at you is that because you're receiving the blessings of these great beings, you're kind of luminous and you're shining. And they like the light reflecting from you. And so then in the front rows, you imagine that your loved ones are there on the left side. And straight ahead, you imagine the ones who you don't have strong affection for or any dislike for. They're like, the doorman, some people like that, just that you happen to know about, acquaintance. And then, this is hard, the ones you dislike, your enemies, you might hate and fear, they are in the front row on the right-hand side. And so, as you think of that, as you're assessing the field in which you're meditating, you sort of look at the loved ones, and then with, say, a particular loved one, you remember when you had a terrible fight over something, and how angry you were at them, and they at you. And they seemed like an enemy, usually all lovey-dovey, but then they were really, oh God, terrible, it was bad, You might think of an ex or something if you have one, or even a regular person, regular relative who sometimes you have ups and downs with. And then say, well, gee, when I was having a fight with lovey-dovey here, they didn't look so lovey-dovey to me. So the lovey-dovey that I'm seeing them with is my projecting of my sense of their being nice to me and having been nice to me and not fighting and arguing and scolding me and whatever, So then you a little bit diminish the sentimental level of your attachment, let's say. And you realize, well, I still love this person, of course, but I know they have the capability of being unpleasant and so on. So I, and obviously in the infinite past, we've been all things to each other. So you lessen the excessive level of attachment to that person, and then you with the neutral one you work on next. You think of a neutral one, and you try to see them where they might have been lovey-dovey, and you might try to see them where they might have been really bad. But you could certainly imagine anybody almost being both ways, and you get where you kind of realize that your sense of unfamiliarity with them is the source of why they don't elicit any kind of much reaction from you, and normally, because your attachment doesn't touch them and your fear and hatred doesn't touch them. And so then project into them. So then you turn to the enemies, which is the hardest one, and pick the most annoying, terrifying, hated one. And then you try to see how it might have been when that one was on your side and was your big supporter and your big lover and your big, et cetera, et cetera. It might be hard since you really dislike them, but you can see how you imagine how they look at someone they love, where they're not being an enemy of, and you realize they have the potential, they even can be mothers, where they love their child, and they were that way to you. So what you do by going around like that is you create, that's the equanimity of the loving equanimity in the instruction. That's the loving equanimity. In other words, the lovingness goes toward everyone, even enemy, because who is at the moment enemy, because you realize that the excessive enmity that you have about some and the excessive attachment that you have to another is your own projecting into those beings and then thinking of it as objective within them. And so it doesn't make you then necessarily go out and like decide to dance with your enemy. And it doesn't necessarily make you, not caring about your loved one, but it just evens it out where you kind of take responsibility for how you have constructed them. And that's then you're in the area of equanimity. And then if you remember back and you try to see everyone as having been your mother, and if you meditate on that, it takes time. What you kind of do is you can see a loving face in anyone, even the most ugly creature. Although it's very hard, actually, when my teacher taught me this initially, before going into it for several weeks, he forgot to tell me, usually never forget such things, but he did. He forgot to tell me that when you imagine all the animals under all living beings, you don't think of them as animals. You think of them in the time when they were humans in another life. So I was having a really hard time with tarantulas, praying mantises, all kinds of ferocious creatures, thinking of them as mom, as me as a little baby tarantula, or me as a little baby praying mantis, like, hey, mom is going to eat you, some of those creatures. So I had a special hard time with animals. And then my teacher, or maybe he did it omnisciently and wickedly, and mischievously, because after I got somewhere with the whole thing, actually, in a few weeks, and then he sent me to visit my mother in New York City, an hour and a half bus ride away, and which I did. And then I had a complete freak out in the subways of all the people's faces because they all looked like my mom. I mean, they looked like deja vu. Everybody did, like they were my relative. So I had to stop kind of flashing on them because they would think I was weird. I had to kind of look ahead. And then I did see her. And then that evening I watched television and I watched Walt Disney's The Living Desert on old-fashioned 1960s TV in color though. And if you've never seen, it's one of those nature films about, and there's tarantulas and there's lizards and there's snakes, rattlesnakes, and there's loving thing can come from that. I don't have time, I think, today. I might go back to it. to go through all 6 steps of developing this moving in the direction of the loving equanimity, and getting to where you will just wish everybody well and wish everybody happiness, which is what he says is the best guarantee to getting a good life, a good rebirth, And so, and he gives the verse gives a little. It says, "As dear ones cannot help beyond this world, and I must wander alone in the between. May Buddhas mild and fierce exert the force of their compassion and clear the dense fog of darkness of misknowledge. Now that I wander alone apart from my loved ones and now apart from them, and all my visions are but empty images, like clear light images, empty, and that's empty image right there. That's Mrs. Kalachakra. Anyway, may the Buddhas exert the force of their compassion and stop the fear and hate-drawn terrors of the between." In other words, and this is reminding you, the person you're reading this to, remember it said read this 7 times, that any terrifying thing they see comes from their own inner anger and fear. And therefore, what they have to do is try to be a little less than that. And then they won't have bad visions, When the 5 lights of brilliant wisdom dawn, fearlessly, bravely may I know them as myself, if she expand my identity and identify with them. When the forms of the Lord's mild and fierce arise, bold and fearless may I recognize being in the between. So that's great. Now, when I suffer by the power of negative evolutionary momentum, may the archetype deities dispel that suffering, calling out here for Avalokiteshvara, and Tara. When reality crashes with 1,000 thunders, may they all become Om Mani Padme Hum. When I'm pulled by evolution without recourse, may the Lord's mild and fierce dispel my suffering. When I suffer due to evolutionary instincts, may the clear light bliss samadhi dawn upon me. That's a very advanced, great thing. That's the basic trust in all of it, you see, which makes you more calm and have your better judgment. And you will pick beautiful parents that way. When you clear light bliss samadhi is somehow in your mind, then you will make good choices. When I'm born by apparition in the existence between, may evil prophecies of perverse devils not come true. Now here you see, when you move from the reality between, where you were seeing all the Buddhas and everything, and you move into the existence between, which is what our topic is, that's when you sort of go through a death, dissolution, and a reemergence as a bardo being, a between being in the existence between. So born by apparition is that instantaneous rebirth, like in heaven or hell, that happens to anybody. But here it's in the bardo. So it's being dissolving and reborn in the bardo. And because you're reaching the existence between, because you didn't go into those pure lands and so forth where they were trying to get you to go, then that means you're beginning to have a changed body, no longer so much the body you had when you were in your previous life. And you should become conscious of being in the bardo so you can see what sort of the body that is, so you won't be attracted to a lower life form. I think I didn't maybe tell in this retreat, in Andy's retreat, about this Lama that lived with me and my family in Amherst, Massachusetts in the 80s for a year. And he was so worried about Miss Piggy because he felt small children were watching Miss Piggy. And if they died prematurely, they might be reborn as a piglet because they would be in love with Miss Piggy. He was really upset about it. We tried to reassure him that it shouldn't really happen, but anyway, he was unconsolable to some extent. May all beings, compatible types in the between, avoid all rivalry and find rebirth in high estates. That is because you're seeing a stampede of bardo beings in the existence between, heading for different rebirths. So don't compete with them and don't rival them, and avoid their rivaling you. When I am hungry and thirsty from intense addictions, desire, hatred, delusion, envy, pride, that is, and fanatic worldviews, may I not suffer real hunger, thirst, heat, and cold. When I behold the coupling of my next life's father and mother, May I see them as the Lord of compassion, Father, Mother themselves, free consciously to choose my birth. Then, for the sake of others, may I obtain the best body adorned with the signs and marks. So, be born as a bodhisattva, that is, by seeing the parents as Buddhas. Having obtained for myself the finest body living, may all who see or hear me swiftly be delivered. That's like Amitabha's vow. You know? Not pursuing any negative evolutionary actions, may I follow and develop all my existing merits. Wherever I am born in every life to come, may I meet again my archetype deity of this life. You know, Avalokiteshvara, Tara, Kalachakra, Yamantaka, whoever it may be, Manjushri, Vajrapani, whoever. May I meet again my archetype deity of this life. Speaking and understanding the moment I am born, may I have the retention to remember my former lives, which is possible, of course. Knowledge great and small, average and various, may I understand it just by hearing it or seeing it. May good luck prevail in the land where I'm born, and may all beings be endowed with happiness. You know, this thing about may I have the retention to remember my former lives is really, really important, you know, and it just reminds me of one thing that the materialists say, and we might think if we have their presence around in our cultural mind, the materialists like to say that when you have former and future lives, or and particularly future lives, was they say, talking mainly sometimes to the theists who don't bother with the former ones, or don't necessarily follow that logical conclusion of the former ones. They say, oh, they're devaluing this life. So you don't care about this life because you just want to go somewhere great in future life. And that's awful. And we're so brave because we only have the one, so we may make a great thing out of it. There's an argument like that. But that's completely the reverse, as usual, all that kind of argument. Because in fact, if you realize that this life of yourself as a human will determine your future lives ad nauseam or ad extasiam, you know, one or the other, then this life is everything. It's the crossroads. It's the crucial moment. It's the pivot in your evolutionary history, because you know about the possibility of really finding liberation. So now is the time to make the most of this life, make it the most meaningful, and so on. That really is an important point to realize in relation to that argument that we do here. So you victors, mild and fierce, as are your bodies, as are your retinues, your lifespans, and your pure worlds, and your superior auspicious signs of greatness, may I and all others become just like you. By the vast compassion of the all goods, it's the Samantabhadras, mild and fierce, by the power of the truth of reality perfection, and by the blessing of tantric adepts, single-minded success, may I accomplish just what I have prayed for. Okay, so that's it for today. See you guys. Thank you. See you guys tomorrow, and at the same time. Okay, and I'll try to have a better mic arranged by then. I will make an effort so there's no echo or no faintness, or etc. Okay, hi Andrew. So thank you. Over to you. Over and out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Let's take our 15-minute break.
Okay.
Jack, we can make it. Let's be generous. Let's make it 20 minutes today. So 20-minute break. Bob, we'll see you tomorrow. Everybody back in 20 minutes, and we have time to talk about some stuff.
Have a nice time. All the best.
Ciao. Everybody, welcome back. Plugged up here.
Hey, Andrew. Yeah, we're all here.
Cool. So I thought what I would do is there were some questions that were piped in. We can start with a little bit of Q&A if you want. Finish the 1 or 2 questions that may have been lingering from the morning. I'll respond to a couple of things, and then depending on how that goes, on one level, this is really cool because I'll have a little bit more time to get through my stuff. So nice. So there's a couple questions that came in via email. What are your thoughts about using a death doula to assist the person in the dying process in the bardos? Fantastic. They're wonderful kind of midwives into the bardos. I mean, from what I know of them, experiences I've had, and I've talked to people who actually train death doulas, it's a wonderful thing. You know, you may want to screen just a little bit if there are religious overtones. Generally, these things tend to be a little bit more secular. That doesn't seem to be a problem, but it's always helpful to make sure that somebody may not be coming in with a kind of a spiritual agenda. What is the significance of 21 breaths? I know this is used in tummo practice as well. Yeah, there are a number of numbers that have power. Numerology is based on this. And for instance, it's interesting, 108 is a particularly big number. If you actually, it's amazing what you can find when you Google. If you Google, for instance, number 108, you'll find like 108 reasons why it's a power number. 21, a little bit less, you know, especially from my understanding, a little bit less kind of proclamatory in its numerological significance. But yeah, I mean, here's something that did come to mind: the 21 Karmapas and the 21 disciples of Guru Rinpoche, the 21 Taras. So outside of that, I don't know anything else around that sort of thing. Here's another number question, which this one, I don't understand the end of this one. So if whoever sent it in is listening and can help me understand it, I could answer it better. If the true nature of reality is the 4th time, it's actually called the 4th moment, then what truly is approximate lifetime? I don't know what that means. I don't know what proximate lifetime means. So if the person who asked this question is listening, maybe help me understand that term. But yeah, the 4th moment is Buddha Standard Time. It's the time zone of Buddha nature, the time zone of the Dharmata, beyond time. It's called the 4th moment because it's beyond past, present, and future. And by the way, past, present, and future are an illusion. I recently read a very interesting quote from Einstein where he basically says something like, we don't live our lives within time, within the framework of time. We construct actually time and space. Time and space are both constructs, believe it or not. We construct everything. It's unbelievable. So, you know, the Dharmata, the timeless time of the 4th moment is accessed through the conduit of the present moment. And so this also ties into one of my favorite quotes from Wittgenstein, one of my favorite philosophers, when he said, if by eternity is not understood endless temporal duration, but timelessness, then he who lives in the present lives eternally. But this isn't even the present. This is what transcends time. And so you can get a sense of this when you enter things like flow states, the zone. Very interesting. Most of these states are usually entered in bodily activity when the entrainment of the body kind of resonates you into the so-called present moment. And then you step into, and then through that portal into the timeless moment. So that's probably all I want to say about that, because talking, you know, deconstructing the nature of time is a little bit outside of our scope. By the way, this is what happens in the Luminous Bardo of Dharmata, which is when they talk about the days in this Bardo, the 12 meditation days. They are in fact meditation days. They are not solar days. The time in the Bardo Becoming, those are solar days, what we know. But in the Bardo Dhammatta, there is no time. You have literally run out of time. I love this double entendre. When you die, you literally run out of time. Literally, you're out of time. And so time doesn't exist. And so therefore, those days in the meditation days when the deities and everything unfold, which we talk about in that weekend, those are meditation days. They're not solar days. The other thing I do want to clarify is this issue about the Pure Land Sutras. Classically, there are 3, not 5. There are, in a certain way, many, many sutras that mention the Pure Lands. One statistic I read, a scholar estimated that the 13% of the Buddhist teachings, the sutra teachings, were devoted to Pure Land material. So generally, when they talk about Pure Land Sutras, they're talking about 3, not 5, 3. And this is the text for it. The best one I've come across, literally the 3 Pure Land Sutras. And these are the larger sutra on Amitayus, the shorter sutra on Amitayus, and then the sutra on the contemplation of Amitayus, the Buddha of long, this is the Buddha of long light, eternal light. Amitayus and Amitabha are basically cross-dressers. They're the same. Amitabha, infinite life. Amitayus, infinite light. And yeah, like Bob said, these are fantastically powerful D-Court sutras in the Pure Land tradition, Sutra Pure Land tradition. Tantric Pure Land is a different beast. And even though there isn't an overt Tantric Pure Land sect in Tibetan Buddhism, there is actually a strong Pure Land orientation. And I'm going to let that go because, again, there's an entire program devoted to this notion of Pure Land. It's a big deal topic. And so I will take, because we got an hour, it's great, yay! If there are some questions from this morning or from what Bob said, my understanding from what Professor Thurman shared with me before you all came online is that, and we'll see if that was just for today or for the other 2 days, but my understanding is he will be signing off at, it's 4 o'clock my time, 2 o'clock my time, so that's 4 o'clock Eastern time. So my understanding is he'll be with us just an hour and a half these next 2 days as well. That could change. So questions from this morning, comments about anything he said, or I don't read everything that kind of pours into the chat. So if there's some discussion that you guys want to share, we've got some time. And then what I will do, which is cool, I'll just pick up where I left off this morning and share with you, I think, a really compelling thing, like I mentioned, from the Kala Chakra Tantra and then a couple other dealies. So please, you're most welcome.
Well, so I was scrolling through the chat. I don't see anything. Oh, okay. So yeah, so Stephanie came in. If time is an illusion, why do we concern ourselves so much with future lives? Why not focus entirely on the present?
Yeah, because again, we have to work with both relative and absolute truth, right? So on an absolute level, time doesn't exist. But we're not there yet. We are living in the domain of the relative. And so with the creation of the illusory sense of self comes the illusory sense of time. It's very interesting that the time, the self doesn't exist in time. The self actually is time. The self creates time. And so this is a juxtaposition of relative and absolute truth and relative and absolute path. Yes, on one level, you don't have to do anything. I mean, literally, you don't have to do a thing. Open, relax, recognize you're already enlightened. Really, no kidding. You're already enlightened. You're already a Buddha. You're already in a Pure Land. They say, the literature says the difference between us, sentient beings, and Buddhas is Buddhas recognize that. We don't. We don't believe it. We don't believe we're Buddhas. We don't believe we're in a Pure Land. And so that absolute maxim, then we use that as a view, but then we work with relative truth, which is involved with karma. Karma also only exists in the domain of relative truth. There is no karma in the Bardo Dharmata. There's no karma in reality, fundamentally. And so because we're stuck and we believe in things, we believe in relative reality, then we abide by those machinations and rules and laws. And if we don't, then we're basically just kidding ourselves. So this is where you have to centrifuge out the difference between relative and absolute. You want to create the merit through the path of accumulation. So I mentioned yesterday where there are 5 paths, 5 stages on the path to awakening. Most of us are on the path of accumulation, whether we know it or not. Accumulation of wisdom and knowledge. And most of this accumulation is relative. You're accumulating merit, good karma, which I don't want to get too literal here, but it acts almost like a kind of cosmic currency where eventually when there's enough merit, you can exchange that merit, so to speak, cash it in, so to speak. Don't take it too literally. That merit then transforms into wisdom, insight. That's the third path, the path of seeing. And this, by the way, this is actually important because you can have an enlightened being, in fact, they're doing it all the time, sit in front of you 24/7 and do pointing out transmission. It can be there 24/7. And the reason it doesn't land with you, the reason it doesn't stick is the tradition maintains not enough merit, not enough merit. So the pointing out transmission is like a seed falling on concrete instead of a seed falling on fertile soil. So we need to prepare the ground, Shila Samadhi, then Prajna. The path of accumulation, lesser and greater, the path of unification, prior to the path of seeing, which is where we want to get. So these preliminary works, these disciplines, the first 5 of the paramitas, I mean, it's just replete in the literature. They all honor relative truth. They all honor karma. And so that's why we have to be able to centrifuge those 2 lenses. Okay. Anything else? Live questions? Dead questions?
Yeah. So we got Hanan coming on here.
I love dead questions. I'm a big fan of dead questions, actually.
It's a live one.
Oh, Hanan. Hi, buddy.
Yeah. How are you doing? I've got a dead question.
Oh, good. I love it. You're a Grateful Dead. I know you are. Fire away.
Everything in the hourglass.
Yeah.
Everything before is okay. Everything after also kind of clear.
Okay.
That point.
Yeah.
The point of the points.
Right.
Let's say I somehow got to that point.
Okay.
I didn't fall asleep or faint.
Okay.
I regained my consciousness, my awareness, and I had no fear for some reason. I don't know why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm there. Now I've become one with that point.
I'm still with you.
And
I'm one with you.
I'm at that point. I'm aware. I'm there. And you said something about creating Pure Land myself, or all the possibilities are open, but then it returns to these other questions of other people.
Sure.
If I'm there and I'm with everything, then who is going to create it? Why would I create it? And how do I even come back to myself? I could become you. I won't, why am I back to me after I've been there?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you understand.
I do, my friend. I'm one with you, man. I got it. I'm one with you. So, well, first of all, the reason you do it, and again, there is no you. So that's in quotation marks. You don't experience it. But the reason you, quote, do it is because recognizing that point, that pointless point, that is wisdom. That's ultimate benefit for self, which is realizing there isn't one. But that ultimate benefit for self, the Dharmakaya, is incomplete unless it's actually unified with the Rupakayas, the form kayas. And so therefore, what happens spontaneously, and this is actually a metric. If you have this experience even during life, one of the ways to tell if somebody has this is their life is, every breath is a service to others, selfless devotion for the benefit of others. That's how you know when somebody's awake. There are no enlightened beings, as Suzuki Roshi said. There's only enlightened activity. So the reason you do it, my friend, is because it's a spontaneous, and again, this is not deliberate. You're not thinking here. it's a spontaneous expression of compassion. Compassion is wisdom in action. Compassion is applied emptiness. And so this is where, quite literally, my friend, it's inconceivable. You know, it's literally beyond concept, before concept. And so we do our very best finger painting, pointing towards these types of things through the teachings, through, remember Bob even said it, you know, the different types of Nirmanakaya. One, like he said, you know, you may come back as this room, you may come back as anything. And what actually drives that is this ineffable, and I mean ineffable, compassion. So maybe if you want to ping this around a little bit more, say more, but that's why. And so, you know, there's no deliberate will, there's no deliberate intentionality, and therefore there's no karma. You simply, here's an example. Here's an example, because I thought about this. If you've ever been in an accident, or some moment of intense sensory impact, a natural disaster, war, trauma, God forbid, but you know, I've been in car accidents, I've had this kind of experience, and I've also read many, many accounts. So I can attest both from my own personal experience and also from the literature that what happens here is in fact a type of spontaneous bodhisattva activity, whereby you will read accounts like, I remember one in particular, somewhere in San Francisco, this car was like, this guy came around the corner, and this car was literally like hanging over the edge of a bridge. And literally the car was about to go over, and the guy in the car would like have been total toast, dead. And so this total stranger, I mean, this Darwin cannot explain this, because this does not fit into the survival of the fittest, right? But something deeper is happening here, where well, let me say this. So what he did was he risked his life for a total stranger. Why would he do that? It makes no sense. From a Darwinian evolutionary psychological or biological point of view, it's utterly nonsensical. Why would you do that? Because you're tapping into something deeper, more foundational. You're actually, my riff on this is the sensory impact is so intense that it literally temporarily stuns the ego, literally stuns the ego out of existence. And before you enter into PTSD, the shock, there's actually a moment when you're literally come to your senses. You actually behave as a bodhisattva, and you reach out to risk your life. You risk your life to save another, because you realize in those instances, there is no other. You're reaching out to save yourself. There's no intention involved there. There's just really spontaneous bodhisattva activity. And so there's two ways to approach the state. One is wait for intense sensory impact, right? You know, enlightenment is an accident. Well, the other thing you can do to make yourself accident prone is you don't have to wait for sensory impact to get that loud. You just have to get really quiet. And if you're really quiet, every moment has that sensory impact. Every moment then commands this type of action. And this is in fact the way the bodhisattvas behave. They don't come in with these grand master plans. They come in to dance, but they let reality lead that dance. They listen. Again, none of that even happens. It just happens spontaneously. It's literally, Hanan, it's effortless. It is utterly effortless. No thinking involved, no intention involved. It's just spontaneous, effortless bodhisattva activity. And we can aspire to do that. And then we can gain intimations of it in these types of experiences. And then more particularly in our meditations, we can attain the status of awakening where every environment has that kind of command, where literally the term is you enter the action, and you act on behalf of reality. You don't act on behalf of yourself. You act as a representative of reality. And therefore, you don't have to think. Reality, in a certain sense, decides for you, chooses for you. And therefore, it's utterly, completely effortless. For people who abide in this place, there's no burnout, because there's no one to burn out. You just behave like this 24/7. So something like that. It's a beautiful question, but that's what comes to mind. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Thank you, Hinan. Just for time, we'll try to get everybody's question answered here. So we can go to Sandhya next. I know you had your hand up
This
for
morning,
the
yeah.
first session too, so get you on here. Sorry, Sandhya, almost got you. Try it. We can't hear you. Your mic's not on. If you hit unmute, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Andrew, deep bow. This morning was just amazing. I learned so much, and it was just so profound. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'm holding up my Buddha, which was given to me 40 years ago from Vietnam before it was unlawful to trade in ivory. Isn't he beautiful? I've been initiated into POA by my Lama, and I think that if I'm conscious at my time of death, that I can perform this transference of consciousness by myself. And my Lama tells me that he feels that even if I'm in a traffic accident, that it will just be automatic for me. And so as much as I love and have studied the Tibet, my plan is to take excerpts from it and some of the prayers and so forth and have those read to me. But I wonder if it would be just confusing to have the book read to me after the time of my death, because my intention is to go right to Amitabha's Pure Land.
Sure.
And so would you please comment on that? Am I too confident, or?
Yeah, you need some travel insurance. But this is really, on one level, pardon the play here. On one level, the Barra yoga is considered a supplemental yoga. I think I mentioned this. On one level, you don't need this stuff. I'm not kidding, you don't. But it's here for a reason. It's taught for a reason. And so I playfully like to think of it as insurance dharma, right? Insurance dharma. I'm an insurance salesman. So the recommendation here is, Pulon Rinpoche talks about this beautifully. He says, when you're heading out for a big trip, it's helpful to have, plan A, plan B, plan C. Because if you make the aspiration for plan A, and remember, expectation is premeditated disappointment. We should make these aspirations, we should do our practice. And then, if everything goes well, that will all take care of us. But as you know, on any trip, sometimes things don't go as planned. And so therefore you have plan B, you have plan C, you have all these other skillful means, including one of which is reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead. So, I personally would implement some of these kind of supplemental strategies. It's not going to hurt. Let's put it that way. I mean, if you're off into Sakavati and you're looking back with a big smile on your face, you maybe can even come back and then enter the dreams of the people that are reading the Book of the Dead for you and send them a good dream. I mean, I'm not kidding. This is one of the powers of being in Sakavati, is you can come in, this is where some of these dreams come from, and have a dream and say, thank you for reading the book. I'm good to go, right? Or whatever. You get the idea. I personally, I would have plan A, I would have plan B, I would have plan C. And again, it doesn't have to be this like overt, but you get the idea. You have, for instance, you have Dharmakaya Poa. That's plan A. If that doesn't work and you do generation stage, that's plan B. If that doesn't work, then you've got Nirmanakaya Poa. You got plan C. If that doesn't work, you've got all the accumulation you've accreted, that's plan D. And as we'll see, there's a whole bunch of other little parachutes that you can pull out if all doesn't go the way you expect. So that's what the tradition espouses, and that's also what I encourage. It ain't gonna hurt. So, you may feel like, I'm gonna have a little bit of extra gas. I'm gonna put a couple extra containers of gas on this trip just in case. It might put your mind at ease. Okay? Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sandhya, for that question. Andrew, we did have a few from earlier if you wanted to take those.
Yeah, I really want to address the questions because then I know I'm going right to what you guys want to hear.
Awesome. So these were from the chat from the morning session. Oh, and I'm sorry, before I ask the question, I just wanted to say that since we're no longer having internet connectivity issues, if you did want to turn your cameras back on, more than welcome to. So cool. Feel free. So this one came from Debbie. What is the significance of 21 breaths? It's used in Tumo practice as well. So I'm just curious about the significance behind that.
Yeah, that's the one I already answered. So
okay, you did get that one. I wasn't sure.
Yep.
Yeah, a few of these are from earlier, and I think you did answer most of them. I just wanted to make sure we got them all.
Cool.
Check, check, check. You did answer that one. Cool. Great. I think we took care of most of those. Awesome. So we've got some new ones coming in. And I think you've answered this one before, but just for reiteration and clarification, what's your take on reading the Book of the Dead for a non-Buddhist?
Don't do it. Really, don't do it. And here I have to say, that is by far the consensus teaching, and it makes total sense to me. But I will give you, there are some, again, no criticism. There are some traditionalists that really maintain that the Book of the Dead is so powerful that you should read it. I personally don't agree. My teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, also said the same. And it's a little bit like, and again, I'm not casting any dispersions criticism at all. It's as if a really well-intentioned Muslim came to your bedside and read the Quran to you. I don't follow that tradition. It may be a beautiful, powerful, mystical text, but it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't want that. So my riff on that, I'd love to hear what Bob says. My general riff is don't do it. Just don't do it. Okay. And in fact, here's the other thing. If you don't already have some connection to this text, many teachers say don't even read it to the Buddhists because, that could also like, what? But again, it depends. Some people feel that the terma of this text is so powerful that it actually transcends everything. Maybe, but generally I wouldn't do it.
Awesome, great, thank you. We have one coming in from Michelle. She's never heard anyone mention the Pure Land of Manjushri before, and would appreciate your take and your understanding of which Pure Land that is, a description of that Pure Land.
Yeah, every Buddha has their Pure Land. And maybe I do a Manjushri sadhana every single day. He is my main yidam, and I'm having a senior moment where I can't remember his Pure Land. Cassell, if you're out there or somebody's out there who remembers Manjushri's Pure Land, let me know. But here's the deal with these Pure Lands, and this is why we're going to do eventually an entire program. The visa requirements on most of these Pure Lands is pretty restrictive. You have to obtain, for most of them, you have to obtain at least the first bhumi. So that's a pretty lofty level of realization. And so this is precisely why the Buddha Amitabha made these aspirations in countless previous lives to create, so to speak, his Pure Land, Sukhavati Dewachen, because it has the easiest access requirements. The visa restrictions here are pretty easy. Relatively easy. And also, again, so much to say here, as Bob was alluding to earlier, when you enter into the Pure Land, even though you may not have, there are gradations, there are lotus stage gradations for where you arrive when you arrive in this Pure Land. And so if you arrive at a relatively low entry, it's still fantastic because it's non-retrogressive. That's why you want to go there. Non-retrogressive. You are then born inside, again, don't take it too literally. You're then born inside this lotus that he was talking about. And then you kind of have to continue purifying and doing your stuff in there. And then eventually you will, so to speak, step out of the lotus and into the Pure Land. I love these images, man. There's got to be a great movie here somewhere. But we're going to say so much more about all this Pure Land business later. The general recommendations, and again, if your teacher tells you something different, who am I to counteract that? But generally, traditionally, Sukhavati is where you want to go, the Western Pure Land. That's where you want to go. That's why when we do the Pure Land program, we will do a tantric, written by a tantric Mahasiddha Karmachagme. We will do a 17-page Pure Land sadhana together that is in fact designed to grease the skids. There are 4 principal ingredients involved in being reborn in Sukhavati. I'm not going to go through all those. That's part of that weekend program, or in this case, maybe a week with Bob. But all these other Pure Lands, they're fantastic. I mean, they're all just unbelievable. But the tradition says, and it's pretty clear, Sukhavati has the easiest visa requirements. It's the one to get into. And then from there, you will progress until full enlightenment. So, why set the bar too high? Get in, get your foot in that door, get your foot in that door, and then, kind of go for it. Shambhala is a different story, slightly different. What's called the Bayuls, the hidden lands, they're a different story. But again, that's a whole different program, so I'm not going to go there right now. Okay.
Great, thank you. Michelle, I hope that answered your question pretty well. Thank you, Andrew. We've got another one from Sonia.
Hey.
If there is no karma in the bardo of Dharmata,
Yep.
then what forces us to contract and be frightened versus happily looking at the mother light?
Yeah, it depends on the phase of the Dharma, the bardo or Dharmata, because the bardo or Dharmata itself has different phases. 2 principal phases, the emptiness phase. Those of you who do these practices, you may want to listen. Treksha is all about the emptiness phase. And then there's a luminosity phase, Togal, also connected to generation stage practice, 4 subsets in that stage. And so it depends on where you are in that bardo. And again, these dimensions are literally beyond concept. So what these teachings point out, to the very best, the limits of language, is exactly what I'm trying to represent. But there are, maybe I'll just leave it at that. If there's a further follow-up question on that, I'm happy to address it. But it basically depends on the extent of the karma. And again, and this is important, most of us won't even recognize this bardo. We're not going to recognize it at all. The karma is going to be so powerful. The bhava samskara, that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. The bhava samskara, the lust for flesh, the belief in existence. This is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. We take on existence because we believe in existence. And when non-existence is pointed out, we don't recognize it. So that bardo doesn't even exist for the untrained mind. So you're going to literally blow right past it. And then you're going to blow past not just the first phase, but the second phase and the 4 subset phases of that, right smack into this, the karmic bardo becoming. So the push, the momentum is so powerful. The wind is so powerful. It's going to blow you right through it. And therefore, your question doesn't even apply. Okay? Doesn't even apply. So there you have it.
Right. Thank you, Andrew. We've got another from Cassell. They're asking, why not just remember your bodhisattva vow and be happy to be born wherever you can best grow and serve? So I guess that somewhat fits in with the one before.
Oh, here it is. I see it. Let me just read it again.
Got it? Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Why not just remember your bodhisattva vow and be happy to be born wherever you can best grow and serve? You're going to have other worries when your body is dissolving. I love you, Cassell. You're the best. Sure, you can do that. But here's the deal. The reason, and if I'm answering what I think you're asking, Cassell, or let me put it this way. If I'm not answering what I think you're asking, just come back online. The reason you want to go to Sukhavati, and And sometimes people say, well, why should I go there? I've made this vow to serve all sentient beings. Am I not copping out? I had this question myself. I've asked many teachers this question. They all say the same thing. The reason you want to go to Sukhavati is because you'll become a Buddha so much faster when you're in Sukhavati. It's a little bit like going to Harvard instead of some, class 10 school. When you go to Sukhavati, it's like, imagine being in a neighborhood where everybody was a tulku, everybody was a deity, everybody was a yidam, everybody was a dharmapala, everybody was a bodhisattva. The center of gravity is so high that you go there because you can accelerate, progress through the bhumis very, very quickly. There's no distraction. Everything is about the Dharma, which is one reason it's pure. And also, nobody benefits others as good as a Buddha. Nobody has the powers of transforming others as much as a Buddha. And so by going there, you will become high-level Bodhisattva and Buddha very, very quickly. And then from there, you can do anything. The powers of clairaudience, clairvoyance, there's a whole list, supercognition, developing powers that arise. You can then, from that kind of platform, basically do anything and actually come back into form, emanate, and be of much, much greater benefit. So if I'm understanding what you're asking, Cassell, that's why you want to do it, because it just facilitates really rapid spiritual evolution to the point of Buddhahood, where you then have so much more efficacy, so much more power to be of benefit. Okay? And if that's not what you're asking, please come back online.
Okay, thank you. And if anybody does want to ask a question, live question, just pop that hand up or post in the chat that you would like to ask one live, and I'll bring you on. I know Shirley had a question. Is a ghost in a perpetual bardo dying and being reborn again, or have they entered the realm of a ghost?
Depends on the type of ghost. There are a number of different types of ghosts. There's hungry ghosts, there's pretas, there's just a number of different types. The term generally is not used in the Bardo literature for the Bardo being. Maybe today if we get to it, or if not tomorrow, when I talk more about this, they're called Gandharvas, Manomaya, made of mind, Bardovas, Bardo beings. They're not traditionally called ghosts. However, part of what you're saying is that you can, in fact, get stuck as a type of ghost and not even know that you're dead. And there's actually a very compelling story about this in Reggie Ray's book, Secrets of the Vajra World. He has this massive 2-volume collection on the overview of Buddhism and Tantric Buddhism. It's pretty good, actually. The last couple of chapters are really quite good, about tukus, about rebirth. And he has a really interesting story about this ghost up at Shambhala Mountain Center, not too far from where I was. This is like perfect, frying the marshmallows in campfire Dharma stories, like ghost stories and Dharma. I love this stuff. So if we were doing this live, so to speak, I would say, okay, we're going to have this question tonight when we have the fire and we tell ghost stories. And so I'll paraphrase the story, but you should read it. It's actually quite riveting. So apparently when people were up at a Girl Scout camp next door called Amakulu, and those of you who have been up there, all these places, and a number of people were hearing the cries of this girl and just, hey, man, there is a ghost here, man. And so they went to Trungpa Rinpoche and they shared the story with him. And he, with his supercognition, tuned in and said, yes, this is a ghost. This is a Gandharva, a Bardo being, a girl who died here, who needs our help. She doesn't know she's dead, or something to that effect. And so then they said, well, what should we do? And they said, you should do a Sukhavati for her. I believe that's what he said. And Sukhavati is a very specific type of liturgy that we do in my community. And so there you go. Here's a tantric siddha giving the practice of sukhavati. And it's a way to basically help people transition into this Pure Land. And so if I remember the story properly, they in fact they did this little ritual thing, they did the sukhavati, and multiple people said at the moment, there's a little kind of moment of punctuation in the practice. A number of people that were there said they felt, perceived, saw this flash of light and this like energy just zooming out. And ever since then, the ghost was gone. Nobody felt it anymore. Nobody heard it. The cries were gone. And, it's a little bit like the iron hook of compassion. Her consciousness with this liturgy, this is how you communicate with these beings, through ritual. And they were able to help her. They gave her this little nudge that sent her who knows where, but she was no longer then stumbling around. So you can, in fact, like in the movie Sixth Sense, you can, in fact, stumble around in the bardos for a long time, not realizing that you're dead. So we'll talk more about this tomorrow. The 49-day thing, that's just, I'm very curious where they got this poll number, really. Like, it's a very interesting survey to come up with this date. But, the 49 days is just a kind of average. For bardo VIPs, I'll talk about them tomorrow, there is no bardo. And then for others, the bardo can last for a really long time. And so I kind of spun around this issue of both ghosts and duration, but something like that.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. I always love a new ghost story too, so thank you for that one. There's a question coming through here, and I'm sorry I don't have the name, but how would one talk about death to someone who has never really thought about it? And even if that moment is getting closer, how would one go about bringing up the topic?
Yeah, good question, actually, very practical. With extreme sensitivity, because on one level, you don't want to run around and just start slapping and standing on soapboxes and shaking everybody and saying, you are going to die. You get the extreme, it doesn't work. So it depends on the situation. It's a little bit like, here's the way I approach it. Upaya, skillful means, is not meeting people where you're at with your agendas. I'm going to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I'm going to do all these highfalutin spiritual technologies. No. Skillful means meeting people where they're at. You let them lead this dance. And so, especially when a person is dying, so two things here. One, for someone who has no interest in this, and maybe for someone who is actually dying, what you want to do there is you want to support them. You want to create an environment of love, release, and relaxation, even if it means supporting their views, which may not be in resonance with yours. You don't want to come in there with your own agenda and like try to convert them. Good Lord, no. This is where you want to shut up, listen, open your heart, and let them guide you. Let them tell you what to do. And so, you could, and again, this is tailored for individual situations, but let's say you really care about somebody and you feel really passionate about these teachings or whatever, and you go, man, these have really profoundly helped me. I wish I could help others with this. How can I do it? Well, you might actually just see if there's a way to segue in by just saying, hey, I just read this really interesting book on death and dying. Have you ever thought about what happens when you die? I did this with my father. I asked my father years before he died, I said, Dad, what do you think happens when you die? He wouldn't even go there. I mean, talk about like no way in. None. Done deal. And so that was it. I'm not going to go in there and say, Dad, you really need to start thinking about impermanence and death, because otherwise you're really screwed on the bardos, right? No. That's it. My mom, on the other hand, again, you said, Mom, have you ever thought about what happens when you die? I mean, literally just like that. And she said, yeah, I did. And so I sent her some books and she loved them. I sent her Sogyal Rinpoche's Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, again, before he went south. I still think that's a masterpiece book, by the way. She devoured it. She loved it. She had all these questions for me. It was fantastic. And so really somewhere in there, I think, are the parameters, and you'll find your own way. But you can always do it. You can say something like, hey, you know what? I'm doing my advanced directives. Have you done them? And then, you'll find a way to see if there's a little bait there. They go, yeah. But some people, man, I mean, like my father, I love my father, pardon the pun, to death. He didn't want to go anywhere near this stuff. And I'm not going to go in there and just, do otherwise. So this is where you have to just check your motivation, really listen, tune into where they're at. And sometimes literally, like I mentioned, if someone you're at the bedside of someone who's dying, you don't want to do anything that's going to ruffle their feathers. You want to create an environment of openness, release, support them where they are, make them feel comfortable, make them feel good, create a holding environment that is conducive for them to let go. This is actually a type of power for them, letting them go from your side. And then, yeah, I mean, something like that. I think those parameters, they've served me pretty well. And I think there's those of you who've done hospice training and the like, these are general hospice training rules as well. So something like that.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that very appropriate and practical question. I think that helps a lot of people that we have here today. So cool. Thank you very much. And thank you, Andrew, for the answer.
Okay.
I see, or one answer.
Sure.
I see Prem with his hand up, so we'll go ahead and switch over to live questions again, if that's okay.
Yeah, live
Great.
questions are good. Hey, Prem.
There you go.
Yes, sir, Andrew. A great discussion this morning. I got a lot out of it. And I've got two brief questions. One is you've done a seminar on the bardo of dying, and now we're doing the seminar on the bardo, karmic bardo of becoming. Are you also going to do the luminous bardo of dharmata?
Absolutely, positively, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, probably sometime in the winter months. And again, the rationale for me is that bardo is so subtle. It's all about non-duality. It's all about the enlightened state. It's not an easy bardo. We're very, very familiar with confusion. We're not very familiar with this level of display of wisdom. And so it's not an easy bardo, even doctrinally. And so I have discovered in doing weekends on this for a long, long time, that it's helpful to have a little bit more mileage with bardo principles, period, and then come back in and do luminous bardo dharmata. But absolutely, positively, 100%. This is part of this series that I started last year in August, a week-long deep immersion into each one of the bardos. So the original aspiration was to do one at Shambhala Mountain Center in August, and then one at Memla in May every single year. But obviously COVID didn't allow that. And so therefore we have this opportunity to kind of do these programs a little bit more rapidly than we normally would. But with that said, and I do have to say this, is wondrous to me as these online things are, I'm leaving at least 50% out. And there's just no other way. Otherwise we would be here, 4 weekends. I'm leaving at least 50% out on every program I've done so far. And obviously a lot of meditations we can't really do. I don't think they're conducive electronically, not in any way to dismiss what we're doing at all, but to point out some of the perhaps obvious or not so obvious limitations of doing these things in an online setting. So once the virus releases and before the next one comes, we're not done with this, man. I don't want to get apocalyptic here, but we're not done with this stuff. I hope to reinstate these programs on a physical on-site basis where then we can, do some things that we just can't do online. But long story, absolutely positively, we're going to do that. And then also, like I mentioned, Sutra, Tantra, Pure Land. These teachings, in my estimation, they're not taught enough in the Tibetan tradition. And when you lift up the hood and start to look, there's actually a number of Tibetan masters, Lachik Labdurm being one, Karma Chagme Rinpoche. They absolutely positively espouse and teach on Tantric and Sutra Pure Land. And so we're going to come back to that. So more coming, so stay tuned.
And my second brief question is, if I remember correctly from one of your past sessions, you made a distinction between open awareness meditation and clear light of mind or nature of mind, or my terminology is clumsy.
Right.
So can you comment on that, or is that too big?
No, I can say a little bit about that. This practice that we're doing, again, this open awareness practice is incredibly powerful. This practice, if this means something to you, if it doesn't, don't worry about it. This is what we'll unpack with a little bit more rigor in the Luminous Bardo Dharma Talk program, actually, is when nature of mind degenerates, when you leave the samadhi of Mahamudra, Rigpa, whatever term you want to use, it degenerates into open awareness. I mean, that's a pretty lofty degeneration, right? I mean, open awareness is so refined and subtle. It's not quite nature of mind practice. And so therefore, you can use open awareness practice as a very powerful segue into true nature of mind practices. And that, again, is that just a little bit beyond what we can do here. But that is, in fact, what we will be exploring in the Luminous Bardo Dharma Talk. We'll be using this as a platform practice. And I will be inviting, coaxing, leading the witness, using certain investigations, inquiries, analytic meditations, i.e. Vipassana, as a way to introduce you, in fact, to these states of mind, using classic over-the-counter text. So I'm not, saying something that's prescription strength that'll get me or you in trouble, using texts like pointing out the Dharmakaya, classic texts by Trungpa Rinpoche and others that are absolutely positively in the public domain, that you can actually use, therefore, to lead you to clear light mind right now, right here. So we'll come back to that one as well. Okay, bud? Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Andrew. With just a few minutes left here, I did want to say that you can rejoin tomorrow using the same link that you did today. We'll be back at 10 a.m. Eastern time. As always, if you have any questions or need any help, just email online@menla.org. Great. And I will be posting links in the chat as we close on the third day, so everything will be there. I will post tonight where you can watch the instant replay videos on the landing page. I'll put that in the chat. And then otherwise, if you have any needs, just let us know. All right, Andrew, ready for another question?
Oh yeah, we got 15 minutes. There's some great questions here. So yeah, I'll let you be karmically responsible for filtering and choosing the questions, okay?
Okay, no pressure. So I know Ted's got his hand up there, so Ted will go ahead and get you on.
Andrew, if I could share an experience I had as a hospice volunteer, going back to the previous question.
Okay.
I just had some amazing woman who did the training. She was a bodhisattva first class. And one of the many things that she taught us was leave your intentions at the door.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And one of the most heartfelt experiences that I had was with a woman who was, very few days left, and she was a Christian Scientist. And I was told about that when I got my instructions, and I went in, and this poor woman was so tormented. She was just yelling, "Help me, help me, help me." And then she would go calm. And so she, in one moment of clarity, she turned to me, had no idea who I was. She said, "Will God be waiting for me when I arrive?"
Mm.
And I said, of course she will.
Beautiful.
And that, I was only there for another 15 minutes, but there were no cries. I went back the next day and she was gone.
Beautiful.
And I mean, that had nothing to do with me. That was just the training.
That's fantastic, Ted. Thanks for sharing that. That is absolutely beautiful. That's the way to do it. Yeah, tuning in, letting them lead, and then just saying whatever supports them and allows them. So that's a fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that, my friend. I did see one here. Okay, I'm going to take some of the karmic load briefly from Wyatt so he doesn't go to Vajra hell by himself. Andrew, Kala Chakra teachings. Joel, my wonderful new friends, Joel and Michelle. Kala Chakra, yes, tomorrow I'm going to read a little bit. I mean, I could do that now if you want. The Kala Chakra Tantra there's a reason it's called the king of the Tantras. It's a colossal Tantra. For those of you who are students of the Shambhala tradition, it's the central Tantra associated with Shambhala. It's a massively important treatise, 5 colossal chapters, beyond profound. And so, I think Professor Thurman himself is actually doing something, and maybe Wyatt knows. I think he's doing something on Kala Chakra like now, or did something, or is about to. So, in fact, before you came online with me, we were talking about this massive commentarial text that I have that he's teaching off of. So yes, I will be coming to tomorrow probably, because I do want to continue to entertain questions unless they run out, to give you a couple chapters from the second chapter, a couple sections from the second chapter on the individual that relate to what we were talking about this morning, how this process that we've been referring to also applies at a cosmological level. And so this ties into what philosophers call the theory of recapitulation, which is just their fancy way of talking about how these teachings apply to every moment, to every day, to every life, to every cosmos. So I wanted to throw in some of the teachings from the Kala Chakra Tantra to show you that what they're talking about is absolutely correlative to what we're talking about here. But in this collective sense, the reading will actually be about how this world system comes together in this same kind of way. So karmic bardo becoming applies to the creation of the cosmos. And so I'll say more about that tomorrow, but king of the tantras, king of the topics. It's a vastly profound tantra that Bob is extremely well versed in. His Holiness Dalai Lama, of course, regularly gives big abhishekas on this. It's the way, by the way, parenthetically, throw this in. This is how you get to Shambhala. You don't get to Shambhala through POA, and I've asked teachers about this. You get to Shambhala through the Kala Chakra. So again, that's a different kind of dealy with Pure Lands and embodied Pure Lands and disembodied, all that kind of thing. But that's how it ties into POA and some other stuff. So I'll let that go for now. I will read some of the stuff tomorrow, and probably just leave it in terms of specific questions, because again, this is a really, really big topic. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I did get a question here. Earlier, you had described 3 types of awareness: ordinary, meditative, and pure. Can you go into further depth about those, if that rings a bell?
The only thing that comes to mind is the 3 forms of illusory form practice: impure, pure, and perfectly pure. So I don't remember talking about 3 stages of awareness outside of that. So if that's what you're asking, maybe ping back up with a follow-up and I can riff a little bit on that, because otherwise what you're saying doesn't land with what I remember talking about.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yeah, if you just want to send me another chat there with a little more clarification or a little more in depth on the question, we'll pose that to Andrew again. But I do see Derek with a hand up, so we'll get you on here, Derek.
Okay.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Andrew. Great course.
Thanks, Eric.
Last night, I had driven up into the wilderness preparing for today's, today's talks. And last night, as I was in bed, I was watching my restless body, and there was a lot of squirming, and it's cold, and I'm in the wilderness, and I'm afraid of an animal attack, and all these things are rising. And I'm a little further back than that, but also there is a face that keeps coming in, and it was present last night, and it's just very stoic. It's never changing. It appears at different times in my life, and I'm curious, considering it came up last night before today. Is there any connection to Buddhism, or any? Maybe you need more of an explanation. Maybe there's nothing there that comes up for you. I'm not sure.
Maybe share a little bit more what the feeling tone is for you when you see this, and maybe just describe a little bit more. I'm not sure I can say anything, but say me a little bit more.
Yeah.
What's the feeling tone? Is there one of fear, one of relief?
No, not at all. It feels very. What comes in the moment is graceful and magnificent. It's a very beautiful experience. It feels like it's something that's been cultivated through my meditation practice. But I don't know if it's a symbol of something, or if it's, I'm kind of at a loss of how to describe it.
Yeah, let me ask you another question. So are you a student of Tibetan Buddhist? Just briefly tell me like what meditations you do and how long. That might help me understand where and what this might be.
Reggie Ray's practices. Yeah. I've been doing those for the last 2 years.
Okay.
I was at a Ken Wilber conference where you were speaking. I had a state change 5 minutes into your conversation.
Oh, the fourth time.
I've often felt you're a teacher of mine, but yet I've never specifically reached out other than some of these courses. As a little Christian kid, I was always drawn to Buddhist books. As a fundamentalist Christian kid, and Buddhist books would always speak to me, and I didn't have a deep connection to Christianity at that time. I've done a lot of Christian mysticism.
Okay, cool. That helps.
Is that enough explanation?
Yeah, that is enough. So, these sorts of things it's really, really difficult to say like exactly what it is. But here's what happens once we start to open the aperture of our awareness. We live, in fact, being a student of Reggie, reread the first 2 chapters of Indestructible Truth, because he talks about the sacred cosmos. This is important, actually. And he writes quite beautifully about how, we are not alone. We live in the it's not a universe, it's a multiverse, where there's all these energetics that we can cultivate, all these non-human intelligences that we can actually invoke, that we do in our spiritual practice. And then parenthetically, also we can invoke in the bardos. They can come to help us. And so once the doors of perception, as William Blake said, are cleansed, right? Then the cataracts of confusion, whatever metaphor you want to use, are removed. You just start to see that you are not alone. We have all around us, separated by the filmiest of dimensions, as Williams James said, these different domains of existence. And so when we engage in spiritual practice, not at all uncommon, Derek, to have in your dreams, that's usually where they occur to me, but shamans have them regularly, these kind of visionary experiences where some type of archetypal presence appears to you that on an absolute level is not separate from you, but on a relative level has its own autonomous existence. They're as real or unreal as you. And they can actually be used as a kind of marker or metric that, something kind of cool is happening. Whether you want to call it an angel, it doesn't matter. That we open our eyes and hearts, we start to tune into these. And sometimes we see them, sometimes we feel them, sometimes we intuit them, sometimes we dream them. And to me, they're marvelous because they shatter or certainly challenge the myopic limited way we have of thinking that only this particular wake-centric stance has validity. Not at all, man. That's called flatland. using Ken Wilber's terminology. It's the pathetic way of looking at reality. It's desacralizing. I mean, it's profane. So reread the first 2 chapters of Indestructible Truth. I think those teachings from Reggie will open you up to this. And the more you open up, the more you start to connect and see and feel and intuit. And then you realize you've got your peeps, you've got your buds. They're all around you, man. Why not establish a relationship to them? Why not invoke them? They can really help you. I mean, someday, pardon my directness, they might sometimes actually just save your ass, right? So open your heart, open your mind, and then you'll start to see not just this, but other little NHIs, non-human intelligences will start to manifest. So thanks for sharing that. I love these kinds of stories. I have to tell you, I teach a fair amount these days. And one of my favorite things is when people share this kind of stuff, which of course, in normal circumstances, you don't want to do that because the people in the white jackets will carry you away. But it's amazing when the avenue of communication is invited. Some of the stories I hear are just unbelievable, and they're actually really, really beautiful. So anyway, my friend, thanks for sharing that. That's what comes to mind. Okay. All right, Andy, I'm sorry, Wyatt, maybe one more?
Yeah, and perfect. We got some clarification on the 3 awareness question earlier. So it's in relation to when you were speaking about mixing the mind with space, which seems to relate to resting the mind in between thoughts or in the gap. So the question, when we mix the mind with space, is that resting in meditative awareness versus Rigpa? And what is the difference between that and Rigpa or nature of mind?
Yeah, that's very similar to Prem's question, which again, I'm not going to repeat that. So maybe re-listen to what I said to Prem. When we're talking at this level, we're not talking about resting in Rigpa. We're talking about resting in space awareness. If for some reason you slip into Rigpa and you know what that is, hey, that's fantastic, right? That's great. But this practice is actually not invoking that yet. It's more at the level of consciousness, SEM. We're not quite at the level of Rigpa. But like I said earlier, this can kind of refine into, in fact, these truly formless nature of mind practices, but we're not quite doing that yet, okay? So it's more colloquial in that sense. So thank you, everybody, for another really fun day, at least from my end. Great questions. I love the questions, Q&A. Hopefully it's not too much, but that's usually what we do anyway. Bob would take the questions. I just took more of them today. So I already told you what I'm going to do tomorrow. Join us again, as Wyatt said, at 10 o'clock your time. And we will continue this wonderful exploration. So hang in there. Don't die tonight. I'm going to give you the secret to enlightenment tomorrow. Just kidding. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So tomorrow, 10 a.m., we'll be right back here. Same link. You can rejoin. I posted a link into the chat there for the instant replay videos. Those will be just on the landing page that you received when you registered for the course. If you click that link, it will bring you right to the landing page, and all the instant replay videos will be posted there, so you can watch those right back. Again, if you had any issues or any questions that you wanted answered or passed on, please email online@menla.org, and we'll be able to assist you from there. As always, I will leave the chat open if you want to save it. Just open the chat, and there should be 3 dots that you can click to open a menu. From there, it should have Save Chat as the top option. In the chat, of course, are super helpful links, informations, and just everybody answering the questions there. So thank you, Sherry, for posting the link to the replays. Very helpful. All right, so yeah, I will leave the chat open and give you some notice before we do close the room down. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everybody.